from Tiger Woods, an alumni of Stanford University. If you don't accomplish the here and now, the future may not be what you intended. So the idea being that, again, the college application process can be a very stressful process, especially as students are thinking about, again, the end goal of what they want to do, the type of life they want to live, the amount of money they want to make, the type of house they want to live in, all of those things. And you can feel a lot of pressure trying to make sure that you're doing the right things to reach that end goal. The idea being what we want to do is make sure that, again, if the students are taking care of the here and the now and understanding what they can be doing right now, I think everything else can work itself out on the end. So really being present in terms of being in high school, the things that they're doing, that they're trying to do now, so that way it can make the process a lot easier on the back end. So we're going to open up, we're going to talk about college fit. So again, when it comes to college fit, when students are going to college, it's a monumental decision. The student is going to be spending the next 4 years at an institution where they'll be devoting time, their energy, their resources, perhaps even their money, to again, to be at these different institutions. And so in that, there's a variety of different factors that the students should be taking into consideration. So again, we want to kind of give you guys some things that you can think about to help really frame the students' process in terms of what they should be thinking about when they're deciding what schools might be a good fit for them. So again, one way I really try to frame this when I'm talking to students about the college fit, I tell them to think about it almost like if you're picking a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Because you're going to be at the school for the next 4 years. You're going to eat there. You're going to sleep there. Again, you're going to be spending so much time getting to know it that you really want to make sure that again, you're picking schools that are actually a good fit. And fit actually goes a far way to a long way in the students' them actually being successful when they go. And so really trying to think about some of these things. So when we think about things such as student body size, there's large schools, large public schools, there's small, very small private schools. There's a variety of different schools, again, and different, student sizes that students might come across, and they should be thinking about how does that fit. So again, are they going to be going to a school where there's 40,000 students and they are in a lecture hall with 1,000 students, where they might not get an opportunity to know their professor very well? Are they going to go to a small school where they actually are in small class sizes, they actually get an opportunity to actually dive into the work, meet their professors? That comes into play. I know here at Stanford University, it's one of the things that we really try to, sell for students when they're thinking about this school is that, again, we have a 5-to-1 student-to-faculty ratio, average class size of about 16 students. And so in that, again, you know that you're going to get to know your professor very well. But if you're going to go to maybe a school with a larger student body size, again, understanding the structure of a lecture where you might have the professor doing the lecture, but when you have kind of discussion sessions for your classes, that might actually be led by a teacher assistant or a graduate student instructor, and understanding the role that plays. And so making sure that students are kind of understanding that. And again, leaning upon maybe some of the experiences that you might have had as parents and teachers in the different sizes of schools and how that might make sense for them. Location, so understanding that, again, students might be very familiar with the colleges that they have right there in their backyard, in their hometown, but also that there's great colleges and there's great schools all across the country. There's 49 other states that students might be able to consider, and understanding that, again, those different types of schools are available there. So understanding what all comes with location. Is it a big urban city? Is it a rural community? Is it a college town where everything that's there is literally built around the college and that's it? Just understanding how far they might have to go away from home. These are things that you can kind of take into consideration when you're thinking about location.
Before you move on, so one of the most overlooked parts of the college search is the exact location or environment that the college is actually located in. So it's really, really important that when students are deciding the institution that they're interested in, that they take a drive not just around the campus, but also around the town, around the city. What's going on in those locations, it's important for them to know is there diversity in the actual community and not just on campus, right? Because we know that you're going to be devoting most of your time, not just in the classroom, right? You have to live and exist in that environment. So it's important that when we are talking about location, we're not just talking about where the college is located, but also what type of environment is the college located in.
So then when we talk about majors and academic programs, obviously, if a student is interested in studying something, if they know that they want to go and study engineering, or they know they want to study the arts, they should be thinking about that when they're looking at some of the schools, because schools might specialize in certain things. For example, Stanford University, we have a very, very broad selection of majors that students have to offer. But understanding if you have a student that's interested in business, If a student comes here, they're not going to be able to major in business as an undergrad student. They can do economics, but they wouldn't have an undergraduate major or a graduate with a degree in business. And that might be really important to a student. That doesn't mean that the students that come here don't get that business background, but just understanding how the setup is for that academic program is really important. Thinking about, again, the classes that they're taking now in alignment. So again, if they're taking a lot of classes maybe in the humanities and the arts at the school that they're at now, they may not have a very strong science background. Understand what that means when you're looking at certain schools as well, because they might be devoted to the sciences and understanding if that's a fit or not. And so just being aware of what those different schools have to offer in terms of academic programs. Again, as we talk about types of schools, so again, you have your private schools, you have your public schools, your state school systems, and understanding what that means. And even like, for example, in California, where we say we have state schools, but again, we have two different state systems. We have the Cal State system and the UC system, and understanding what's the difference between those two. So we know here in California that UC schools are very based in research, whereas the state schools, again, it's more broadly based, understanding the skills you can apply it after you graduate. So really helping kind of like frame that for students. Again, understanding then when you think about like Catholic schools or Jesuit schools, understanding what that might mean for a student. So again, a student can go to a Catholic school. That doesn't mean that they have to be Catholic, but understand that that school might have a very specific moral code or ethics that students have to abide by to be there. So again, if that doesn't jive with maybe how they've grown up or if they can apply to that code, they might want to think about that when they're applying to that school. Always should have financial aid as consideration. Again, just understanding that when you're looking at the different schools, how do they offer financial aid to students? Is it a school that they give out mostly loans to their students, or do they have really good financial aid programs? Do they have a lot of different scholarship or grant opportunities, which is free money for students? And just understanding how do they give that out. For example, here at Stanford, one thing you might think about is that you'll see the cost of attendance for a school being $72,000, but at the same time, you look back around and understand that Stanford also doesn't expect students to take out loans. So the financial aid that they give is only need-based, and the financial aid that they give is all the money that you don't have to pay back, so the scholarships and the grants. So understanding how the different schools kind of like their philosophy around financial aid and really helping them kind of like research that when they're looking at the different schools. Also enrichment services. So again, when the student gets to campus, what are the opportunities, the services that are provided to the students to help them continue to develop when they're on campus? So do they provide tutoring programs for the students? Do they have study abroad opportunities? Just understanding the support systems that they have for students when they get there, so that way they can feel like, again, they're developing into what they want to be when they graduate from college. Understanding that that's a part of what you're looking at, not just, again, the door when you're looking at the college. Then when you talk about diversity, just understanding what that means. And so again, diversity can be very broadly defined. So understanding that diversity here at Stanford might mean something completely different from diversity at an HBCU. And so understanding that, again, even at an HBCU, if all their faces might look like ours, that there might be diversity there, that again, they might have black students that are coming from other parts of the country who grew up a little bit different from where you came from as well. So again, the diversity also extends to the faculty and the staff as well. So the people that are going to be teaching the students, the people that are going to be supporting the students and making sure that they're safe while they're on campus. Do they look like us or do they look different? And are you okay if they look different from us? Just understanding that is another layer that students should be looking at when they're looking at different types of colleges. Then finally, extracurricular activities. And so again, also, when they're going, we know that our students are scholars, they're going to get an education, they're going to get a degree. But again, it's different from high school in the sense of that they're going to have a lot more free time. So what are the students going to be doing to fill their time when they're outside of school? And so again, what activities are they going to be able to take part in? Do they really care if the school has a very strong athletic program or not? Again, the party scene, that might be really important to them to understand that they can let their hair down and have fun when they finish all their schoolwork, because we know, again, we want to make sure that they're graduating and getting their degrees, but again, what are they doing outside to keep themselves kind of like sane when they're putting in all of that work? So just understanding that, again, these are just a variety of things that students should be thinking about when it comes to fit, and understanding that, again, helping them understand that with all these different things, they may not all be a priority to them. For some students, the diversity might mean a lot more to them than what type of school that it is, or the type of majors that they have might mean more to them than the location. Or they might really care what type of weather that they have, because again, I know me, when I was in college, I didn't want to go anywhere like too far because I was afraid of lightning. So if they had a lot of storms, I wasn't going over there. So again, just understanding that again, this really does come into play when students are doing that, and helping them make that priority list in terms of what they actually need or what they just want out of college.
Before you move on, so just one final point that I wanted to make on one of the pieces up here. When it comes to the majors and academic programs, when students are applying to colleges, in the current student experience, it's about 35 to 40% of students that enter college actually switch majors 2 or even 3 times before they graduate. And so it's really, really important that when students are picking institutions, that they're not just picking institutions that have their top major interests, but have their top 2 or 3 major interests. That way, if they do decide to switch majors, they don't have to switch institutions or transfer. And so that's really, really important that the college has the breadth of the majors that that student might be interested in and not just one particular major.
Okay, that's a question?
Sure. Yeah.
Cool. I'm glad that list you put up was a good one, because for me personally, the location and student body size was very important to me when I came out. But the question I wanted to ask was, you mentioned the business and business administration or business degree as opposed to the economic degree. Can we explain that?
Yeah, so I mean, generally speaking, that again, when students are like thinking about, again, a major, they might really, care about what that degree actually says. And so again, for example, a student might be really interested in business administration, but they might really, in their mind, what they really care about is marketing. They might really care about like finance or something like that. And so again, different programs, again, by the name, that might help the student understand how they kind of structure their program. So with economics is understanding that they might dive really deeply in the economics part of it, maybe more so than the marketing and the other pieces of it. And so again, just understanding that when you see that, what that name means, that look beyond the name as well, and understanding that how that school actually structures that program. Because again, they might get the same experience somewhere else, even though the title doesn't look the same. The encouragement is to actually do the research and understanding that again, if they call it something different from what you expect, why do they call it that way? Actually go and ask the school or search the website and understand like what classes kind of go into that major.
And that actually brings up another really good point, which is that students really need to research the majors that they're interested in, right? We know that there are typical majors out there that just by the name of the major, you know what it is, right? And so whether if a student's interested in education or if they're interested in pre-med, you know what that student wants to do. Most students are going to go to college, major in education, and then become a dentist, right? But there are those majors out there that, especially for a high school student, they might have no idea what that major prepares you for. So like a major like sociology or anthropology or even communications, right? So communications can go in so many different ways. It's important that students have a really strong understanding of what these majors are. A lot of times in higher education, we call those discovery majors. Students will typically come in undecided or they'll come in under a certain major and then they discover these majors once they get onto a college campus. And so to reduce that risk of students transferring or switching majors, it's important that they have a strong understanding of what these majors are. So when they see a word like anthropology, they know exactly what that is compared to a sociology major or a psychology major or whatever.
So one thing I wanted to talk about is this concept called undermatching. A quick show of hands, how many people have heard this word or this concept before? Great. So again, undermatching, simply what it means is that there are, is when students, when they're applying to colleges, they decide that they're not going to apply to certain colleges because in their mind they think that they don't academically qualify, when in fact they might actually do. And you really, really see this when it comes to a lot of the more selective colleges where they think that like, oh, well, because I'm from here or like, I got this grade in one class or something that I won't qualify, so they're afraid to apply. We definitely see that a lot here at Stanford. Again, understanding how competitive it might be to apply here. Some students don't even give themselves a shot because they think that they're not qualified to do so. And that's actually not the case. Again, we see this mostly among students from minority backgrounds, low income, or first generation college students. And so again, they might not have access to, again, those resources to understand what a school might have to offer or how a school kind of like looks at the applications in that way. So again, the idea being that, again, if a student is really trying to go to a school, if they see a school and they really feel like it has everything that I'm looking for in a school, I'm just not sure if I necessarily meet the guidelines or not, then again, as you do that research and understanding kind of like how close I am to kind of like what students who are usually admitted there look like, again, that can help really reduce the idea of undermatching because, again, you'd be really surprised how many students we have who, like, they might have applied to Stanford because they really had that support in terms of a parent or a counselor or a teacher like, you should really look at this school, and they apply thinking they have no chance to get in, and they actually do get in here. Again, I know here, I read for the state of California, so I see plenty of students, especially students of color, who apply because they might have heard of Stanford, but again, they think because of their school is very low income, they think that, again, no one is ever going to want to Stanford, that I'm just not going to have any shot. Again, when we read applications, we really have the opportunity to read in context. We really get to understand that school, and when we're reading the applications, we're not comparing two applications against one another at any point. We're not comparing two schools against one another at any point. We look at the student based upon, again, their school setting and how they perform with the classes that they have available to them and the resources that they have available to them. So again, if a student is performing really well in their context, again, that gives them a fair shot to be able to get in because, again, they are among the best of where they're coming from. And we're not comparing them to students from X state or Y school or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and this is, me and Yancy and the rest of our diversity team really spend a majority of our time trying to solve this undermatching phenomenon, right? So we go into low-income areas and we speak to students from all across the country, and we know that they are good enough to apply to get into schools like Stanford. I also worked at an Ivy League before here, and so they're good enough to go to those schools, but students are self-selecting themselves out of the pool, right? And a lot of that has to do with the fact that when you see an admit rate of 4.69, or when you see these admit rates that are in the top 10, or that are in 10% or single digits, students are discouraged, and we completely understand that. However, the disconnect that exists is that these institutions, Stanford also being one of them, are affirmative, and they're actually looking for first-generation students. They're looking for students of color. And so it's really, really important for all of us in this room, really, as gatekeepers, as motivators, as mentors, to really encourage our students to reach. And we're going to talk about the different schools that go on a college list, but it's really, really important that our students reach for some of the best institutions because they are qualified, they do belong, and you can ask any first-generation student that currently exists on our Stanford campus, they do just fine, right? And so these institutions, and I think the most interesting thing about it is that these really selective institutions have the greatest support systems for first-generation students and for low-income students. And so it's really, really important that we all continue to encourage our students to reach and to push some of the best schools. Yes, ma'am?
Can you recommend, I believe there are some people who are consultants and they actually work with students, high school students who are applying to colleges to help them find the best match, and they may have connections with people like yourselves and people in other colleges across the campus. I know my stepdaughter hired someone to help her with the whole application process and college tours and just basically navigating through the whole system. So if you're a parent or you're not sure that your high school counselor is going to do, you just want to get as much resources as you can. Are you guys familiar with people who do that kind of work, or how you would find those kind of consultants?
So I can't say that there's a specific educational consulting firm that I would prefer over another. I know that they do exist. Just like really anything else, they have varying levels of success and effectiveness. I would really just say that, and to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know if they're necessary. I think that if students reach out to the multicultural recruiters at those schools, I know that just by creating that connection through the student, really more so than even counselors or mentees, we all of a sudden, our ears perk up because it shows a student who is being proactive in their own educational attainment. And so for us, it's not necessarily there's a group that's out there per se. There are some really great community-based organizations. There's some really great college access programs that are out there. That's wonderful that students get associated with those. But I don't think that there's one in particular that's actually better than another.
Yeah, so really, I think what it boils down to is that, again, I would almost frame it this way. You can pay for something, or you can go to, again, where those resources, again, might be available at the school. If it's not, like Timmy mentioned, community-based organizations, nonprofit, and college access programs that, really offer a lot of these resources pretty much for free. And so in doing that, just thinking about the return on investment, because again, really a lot of the work is not done by the consultant, it's the student and what they've done in high school. Again, if you think about taking care of business in high school, again, those colleges might start looking for you. You don't even have to go out and look for them. And so it's just something to keep in mind if that's something that you consider. But with that, again, when it comes to like really trying to find those schools, really trying to find like, schools that might be a good fit for me, because I don't know what other colleges are out there. There are tools that are available for free for students, and that you can again, walk through the students with to be able to kind of start to put this stuff into consideration. So one example of that is Big Future. So this is a website that's put on by the College Board, the same people that run the SAT. And so again, this is a website where students can go to, and they can actually find colleges based upon different criteria. So again, by location, by student body size, by academic program, by cost of attendance. So again, you really can really start to kind of open the door and understand kind of what type of schools, what type of opportunities are out there and available for students. Another one is a college scorecard. So this is the one that was put on by President Obama in the Department of Education. So again, when they were deciding they were going to make a college rating system, they kind of ditched the ratings, but what they did, they created this tool where students can also again go in there and start to find schools that fit certain criteria that students might be looking for. And so again, just an alternative resource that students are able to go to be able to really try to research, trying to find what options and opportunities are out there and available to them. And then finally, again, Naviance. So again, Naviance is a program that, again, that a lot of counselors and school systems use. So again, it's a very broad program. Within that, there's a tool called College Match, where again, where students are able to work with their guidance counselor, and basically it has a lot of information about the schools in there. And so again, a plug for this is that this is encouraging students to actually, continue the dialogue with their guidance counselors, because guidance counselors can play a very important role in the college application process.
Is it possible to have a link to this presentation?
Yeah, we'll work with the organizers to make sure you guys have access to it.
Good afternoon, or still good morning. So, my name is Natalie, and I would just like to offer to the parents and the counselors another resource that might be available. My employer, for example, had a paid-for program called College Coach, which was free to the employees, and many of my colleagues weren't even aware of it. They didn't really actively promote it. But so check with your employer to see as a benefit if they offer that. These are former college admissions officers, directors from Ivy League schools, many schools across the country, and they offer services. They'll read your child's college essays. They'll look at their college courses. They have people that were former financial aid counselors that kind of advise you and help you direct. So this as another resource. It's called College Coach. It's also a resource that you could, sign up for on your own if it's not available. And we found it very helpful for our daughter who's a sophomore in college now. So.
Thank you for sharing that. And so again, this just points out that again, there are resources out there that you and your students can actually start using now to really try to start making sense of what schools are available based upon the priorities or the things that they need out of a college. So now I'm going to shift over. I'm going to let Timmy talk a little bit about the actual application process.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm not going to stand behind this thing. I got quick feet. All right. So I want to talk about the application process really in general and the advice that we are giving to the students. And so as I mentioned before, it's important that when students are creating their college list, that they have a variety of different types of schools on there. We suggest a minimum of 6. On average, students are applying between 10 to 12 schools. And so on that list, there should be target schools, safety schools, and reach schools. And all of this revolves around the academic profile that is published by the institution. And so if you were to go onto their website or if you were to talk to their admissions counselor, you can ask them what's the mid-range GPA, what's the mid-range SAT scores. The schools that are target schools are those that students fit within those profiles, right? The schools that are safety schools are those schools where students exceed those profiles, and so if your average GPA, your GPA might be higher than the average that is being promoted or marketed out there. And then the reach school is going back to that undermatching phenomenon, and that says if you are interested in a school and that school has everything that you are looking for, but you might not necessarily fit within that academic profile, you should apply anyway. It's really strong it's really important that you should at least consider applying to those schools anyway. And once again, I would say a minimum of 2 reach schools should be on that college list. So there's a variety of different types of applications that are out there right now. The Coalition application is the brand new application that's actually going to be launching this fall. All right, and so the Coalition is 90 different schools Those 90 schools, the criteria to be a coalition school is that you have to have 70% or better is your graduation rate for 6 years. And also the private schools have committed to covering all financial need for students, and the public schools that are coalition schools have committed to making sure that in-state tuition for students is considered to be low. And so, and low being based versus the national average versus income within that state. The Common Application, everyone here is more than likely familiar with the Common Application. It's been around for a couple of years now, over 700 schools for that. And there's the Common Black Application specific to the HBCUs. With all of these schools, or with all of these applications, really the point is that you're able to create one application that then allows you to apply to multiple types of schools. Right? And so these are really great time savers. Y'all remember applying to colleges, every single one, right, by hand, right? So students have the opportunity to do this, but I will tell you that it's important, and we'll get into a timeline later. The first part of the Common Application is actually pretty long, and it's pretty in-depth. The college essay is also on there, and so it's important that we get a jump on that and don't wait till the 11th hour to use these different applications. Okay. Applications can cost a lot of money, and so it's important that students, if you are eligible for fee waivers, that you go and get fee waivers. It's incredible how many students we talk to that their first questions about applying to college is paying for the application fee, that don't even realize that they benefit and they are eligible for these application fee waivers. And these are not just for the college applications, also for testing, right? And so for SAT or ACT testing, it's important to use these benefits that are out there for you. Not everybody's going to necessarily advertise these benefits, but that does not mean that you are not eligible for these benefits. And so as gatekeepers, again, it's important that we let students know that this is a tool, that these are tools that they have. You can see up here that to be eligible for some of these, free or reduced lunch, any student that is on free or reduced lunch qualifies for those programs. They participate in programs that serve low-income students like Upward Bound, or if the family receives any type of public assistance. And so if you're working with any of those types of students in your communities, they all qualify for fee waivers. And so that's really, really important. Talk to your counselor or visit the NACAC website to go and find those fee waivers as well. You can always call the admissions offices at any of the institutions that you might be interested in. They'll gladly talk to you about where you can find fee waivers also.
And one thing I'll add to that is, again, if your student may not necessarily be low income, but is participating in one of those programs that serves low income students, they qualify for a fee waiver as well. So that's extremely important to know that distinction. And again, so they'll be able to do that just because they're a part of that program.
There's different types of application processes that are out there as well. And so there's early decision, early action. These are some of the most popular ones. Really the main difference between early decision and early action is the binding clause. And so if a student applies to a school early decision, that means that should be the only school that student applies to. And if admitted, they have to withdraw their applications from any of the other institutions that they are applying, with the ethical promise that they plan on attending that institution. Early action is non-binding, and really what that means for us in admissions, it's priority reading. And so when we receive applications that are early action, we read those applications first. There's usually an early action deadline that comes before the regular decision deadline as well. And so students are able to get their decisions much faster without having to necessarily be committed to that institution. And so I always encourage people to go for early. If there's a decision between early action and early decision, I always encourage people to go early action, simply because there's no binding agreement there. Every institution is going to have a regular decision deadline as well, right? And so regular decision deadlines are typically in January or February for applications to get in. Even though that's the deadline, I always tell kids to get their stuff in much sooner than that. That way you're not worrying about applications in the spring semester of your senior year. And then rolling admissions. Rolling admissions are for institutions that really have open enrollment up until the first day of class. And so I always tell students, if you are really, really worried, you should make sure that some of your safety schools have rolling admissions. That way, if you get a whole bunch of letters back that are not necessarily friendly, you still have the option of applying to schools beyond any of the deadlines of these other institutions. And so making sure that rolling admissions schools are on your list is going to be really, really important. And you can Google any one of these, and you can look for rolling admissions institutions, and you'll get an entire list across the country of where those are.
And those tools that are provided also offer, like if you want to look at schools by their type of admissions programs that they have. You can also search that way as well.
Yes?
A question of clarification, I've always been curious about this, I've gotten different responses. So when a student applies early decision or early action, are they only quote unquote competing with other students that are applying in that same group of students? Say for example, if someone applied early action and was not admitted, if they had applied regular decision, would they potentially have been admitted?
That's a very loaded question. So that's hard to tell, because honestly, that ranges from institution to institution, first of all. And then I think that if a student applies early decision or early action, at most institutions, there's a higher acceptance rate through those programs than there is during the regular decision process. And so the likelihood that a student is denied early action, the likelihood of that student being reviewed regular decision and getting in is actually pretty low. Because institutions have the option of deferring a student to regular decision if they want to, right? And so when we're reviewing applications in these early rounds, we have the option of admitting, denying, or deferring that student to the regular decision pool. A lot of times that happens in the event that we have a student where we really need to see their senior year grades, and we'll talk about that in a little bit before we can make a decision up or down on that student, so we'll defer that student to the regular decision pool. The question that you should be asking your counselors or your college admissions folks is, if students are deferred to the regular decision pool, what percentage of those students get admitted? That's the thumb on scale question that you want to ask. In the event that you do receive that letter, that way you can counsel your students properly to say, all right, maybe there's still hope, or we might want to let that student go.
So
Right?
if a student applies early action, so whoever's reading their application, they're evaluating that student just based on what's there on the paper before them, not necessarily how many of these early action students can be admitted.
No, yes, and so for every institution, when it comes to planning, right, there's a certain percentage of students that they're going to take in their early action process. So yeah.
But I would say that, again, the determining factor of the application getting in is not so much the admissions officer trying to remember, like, we got to meet a certain percentage during this time. The application itself is the determining factor.
Yeah.
And so, again, when a student is deciding, like, should I apply, like, early decision, early action, or regular decision, they should apply when their application is the most ready. So again, if you're thinking about an early action program, but you're thinking in your head like, oh, like if I take a couple more classes, I might like be able to boost my GPA a little more. I want to take like the SAT or ACT one more time to get my score a little bit higher. If you're thinking about any of those things, trying to make your application a bit better, it might make more sense to apply regular decision just because you have more time to make yourself as good as it possibly can be. But if you're solid, like up from the jump, like my GPA is where it's at, like when I read my own essays, it makes me cry, like I know that I got this like put together, then again, you can look at some of those early action programs, because again, you're applying when your application is the most strong.
Thank you.
There was a
Yes,
question.
ma'am.
The Stafford Super School?
Yes, we will get into that. Absolutely, absolutely. All right. Good question. So we'll talk about the application itself.
Awesome. So yeah, so we're actually going to talk about some of those things now. So again, regardless of the institution that you apply to, whatever application process they decide to do or application that they use, you generally see the same things in each one of those applications. You're going to be looking at grades, you're going to be looking at test scores, you're going to be looking at recommendations, extracurricular activities, and the essay. Again, you're going to see these things pretty much universally across any college that you apply to. So again, let's talk about the high school transcript. By far, this is going to be the most important part of the application process. Whether a school weights certain parts of the application process or not, or assigns more points for different parts, regardless of what it is, if they do it or not, this is always going to be the most important part, because again, they have to know with some type of confidence that when the student actually gets to campus, they'll be able to perform well academically. And so again, when we're looking at the transcript, again, notice on this slide, you don't see anything, you don't see the word GPA. Because again, the number in and of itself is not as important. We look at everything in totality. And so again, we're looking at, again, the classes that the students is actually taking, the rigor of the classes that they've actually taken. So are they taking like honors courses or advanced courses or AP courses, whatever the case may be. Again, we're going to be looking at trends. So we're going to be looking at, again, maybe the student didn't start very well, but they're like performing really well right now. and the vice versa, because we see students that maybe started off high school really well and are now like sputtering. And so again, we see that because when we're applying, we're really trying to get a sense of where the student is at right now and the journey that they've made through the academic courses that they've been taking. Again, the big focus is usually on the core classes, so your math, your English, your science, social studies classes. So again, those big core requirement classes are really important, because again, you go to some schools and students might have did really well early, but they get to senior year and they're taking like 3 PE classes and a dance class and a music class and an art class. And again, it doesn't give us the best sense of where they are and their preparedness to be in college right now. And so again, when we're really looking at that, we're really looking at these pieces in consideration. And again, senior year performance is really important, because again, a student might do really well and they get admitted to the school and it's like, oh, all right, senioritis is time to kick in, I'm coasting on the way through. And again, it is not unusual for a student to kind of like bomb that last part right after they got admitted, but before they graduate, and have their admission pulled. And so again, understanding that when they get admitted, we expect them to keep their foot on the gas and finish strong, so then that way, again, they're giving themselves a chance to start on a good foot when they actually get to campus. And so again, that academic record is going to be like the basis of everything we're looking at in the application.
Yeah, wait, before we move on. With this piece, the other point that really needs to be driven home is academic alignment, right? And so students who are interested in majors like finance or accounting, it's important that when we see your transcript, we see a strong acumen of math throughout the entire program. For those of you who are counseling students, if students are interested in things like engineering, we need to see calculus on that transcript. We need to see physics on that transcript. And so calculus versus, what's the class that a lot of students versus statistics, correct. So calculus versus statistics, right? And we need to see physics versus anatomy and physiology, right? If you are interested in engineering, right? And so those academic alignment pieces are really, 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 really important. And this goes back to students picking their majors, separating the difference between interest and skills, right? So we have students who might be really interested in math, but you ain't good at math, right? And so we have to make sure that we are making sure that these students are aligning to these proper majors, not just for acceptance, but also for success when they get to the college that they apply to.
Thanks. So now testing. So again, testing is always, was there a question over here?
I just had a quick question about AP and honors courses.
Yes.
Because I know you guys take the time to learn the different schools and what's offered. Some schools might not have AP courses versus
Right.
some may. But do you know, like, the percentage of students that are like, in the AP courses? For instance, go to a school and it's not predominantly African American, and not a lot of African Americans get in the AP classes because, you're only going to let 30-something students in. So your student may want to take that class, but they didn't get in the AP class. And how do you, look at that? Like, you look at a school profile and say, okay, they offer AP calculus,
Right.
but that's only 1% of African Americans or students of color actually take the course. You don't know if they actually don't want to take the course versus they couldn't get the course.
Well, so I think an important part about that, like if you're actually coming from that background where the school is really the determining factor if a student can take the class or not, again, that's context that, again, hopefully we would get that from the counselor, because the counselor, again, they give us a school profile, and they may or may not say that in the school profile. A student has the ability to put that in the application as well. There's usually a section for additional information to kind of give us that type of context, if the student wasn't able to take AP classes for whatever situation. So again, that's something that we can take into consideration at that time.
And while the student can self-advocate, that piece, I think it's really, really important that the counselors let us know that type of information. And so, and it's the same thing with students. Actually, what we're starting to see a lot of is students who don't take the AP class, but they actually self-teach themselves and take the AP test. And so that's also something that counselors can make us privy to, and that'll be really, really important. We're going to talk about the recommendation letter and all of the context that allows us to really take a look at these students at. And to go on her point, it's really important that everyone knows that it's quality over quantity when we're talking about those AP honors courses and dual enrollment in college courses. We'd much rather see a student take 3 or 4 of those types of courses and score A's and B's than see students who take 13, 14 AP courses and they have B's and C's in those courses. And so it's definitely quality over quantity. And also, once again, if you have the opportunity to, it's important that those AP courses are once again in line with your interests, right? And so making sure that the entire application is a pitch to why you should be admitted to an institution, to a particular major. And so we're constantly looking at that throughout the application. So any way that you can make that pitch, whether that's through your academic record, your essays, your recommendation letters, your extracurricular activities, we're looking at all of that to determine fit for the student into those programs.
Yeah, and just understand that U.S. parents can really hold the school's feet to the fire. Like, if I want my student to be in this class, again, U.S. parents have the ability to go and advocate for their student as well for that one piece. But also, and like you said, students should challenge themselves where it makes sense. So again, if the student isn't really strong in math, they don't need to go and take the AP calculus to try to impress the school, because again, they're just going to be held accountable for the classes that they're taking. So again, alignment and understanding their challenge themselves where it makes sense. And again, if those opportunities are not there, either because the counselor is kind of like limiting, or they just don't have them at the school, then again, really look at other options that you have to do that. Are you able to take classes at the community college? Are there other arenas where you can kind of like go and challenge yourself in those classes if the opportunities are not available to you there at the school?
So would you view, though, a student that has taken a math AP gets a C versus a student that takes the regular math and gets an A or a B? You know what I mean? The intensity of the class, the material, right? Would that give you a different perspective of the student, though?
That's what, go ahead.
I would say it would. I mean, our preference would be we're going for the student that's taking the AP class and getting the A. And so again, to say when you can challenge yourself and it makes sense, you go for it. Again, because it's part of a bigger story that's being told. So again, if we're looking at a student who's applying, they really want to do the humanities and stuff like that. Again, if they're not taking the highest level math, we might understand that, because again, they are putting a lot more effort into humanities classes and things like that. Right? We can see that level of context within a transcript.
We talked about the value of community college classes with regards to honors AP. Is it in community college classes, or are they at what level are they at?
That might actually depend on the school, because some schools, they actually have, again,
Sorry, her question was the value of a dual enrollment college course versus an AP course and an honors course. How do we as admissions folks look at those in regards to rigor, right?
Yeah. So again, it might depend on the school, because some schools are set up where they're early college schools, so they don't even have the AP classes. All the advanced classes they offer are actually community college classes. Some schools, again, they have the variety of programs. They have AP courses. Some schools have IB programs, which is a different type of advanced program, and students can take community college. Again, for us specifically, we actually let the school make the determination of what they consider the most rigorous in that way. So again, it really depends on the school setting in which the student is coming from. What I will say is that, again, we do note that, again, if it's a college level class, that again, if the counselor has the ability to kind of like put that information in context in the school profile, that can really go a long way in us really understanding, again, what that means within that school.
But typically, a dual enrollment college course is definitely looked upon more favorable than an honors course, for example. In regards to AP, like Yancy said, that's going to depend on the institution. AP courses, I'll tell you right now, when it comes to the AP courses, a lot of times it's not even, because, all right, so this is what we have to deal with sometimes, right? We'll just get real quick. So high schools are rating classes in a variety of different ways, and we recognize this, right? And so some schools are really, really hard on their students, and some schools gradedly. And so the way in which we're able to review something like an AP course is really based off of the test, right? So it's the AP test that allows us, that's the only thing that's equal amongst the courses across the country within an AP classroom. So we are looking at AP tests. And what we actually see a lot of is we see a lot of students of color who are taking AP courses but are not taking the test. And it's important that students take the test. Because to be perfectly honest with you, the competition, the majority of students aren't even taking the classes anymore. They're just taking the test, right? And so it's important that we are encouraging our students to take the test in those AP classrooms. Dual enrollment college courses, however, make their own argument. It says that a student is able to do college level work, and that's the argument that we're able to kind of convince the rest of our colleagues when we say this student decided to take dual enrollment college courses instead of AP courses. And so while they're weighted the same, and that's also the same thing for IB-HL courses, and so for IB level courses that are the high level courses, those are also looked at kind of in the same type of rigorous band as those AP and dual enrollment college courses.
All right, so again, with testing, the important things I'll say about testing is this, is that one, it does not take precedence over the test, or over the academic profile. Testing does not really tell a student's ability to actually be able to do well when they go to college. Again, what we have, the ability to really see is that, again, we understand how different groups of students from different cultural backgrounds, how they on average tend to perform on a test. And so again, this is something that we can take into consideration when we're reading applications. With that being said, again, when you're looking at schools, you want to try to do as best as you can on the SAT for a couple of reasons. One, because again, the better you do, the more competitive you can be. Second, as you do that, again, you can the higher the test score, it can actually be used for scholarships. So again, some schools might have it where certain students that are admitted that meet a certain test score, they might automatically get scholarships for that. And then some scholarship organizations might actually, they might go to kind of like the College Board or the ACT and be like, we're looking for really strong students of color so we can give out scholarships. And then they might actually give them all the students of a certain group that scored above this level, and we'll actually reach out to those students for scholarship opportunities. And so again, you still want to try to do well because again, there's benefits in doing well on these tests. What we recommend that if students are going to be taking the test, they should take the SAT and the ACT, and these are usually the ones that are the required ones, the SAT or the ACT plus writing. What I would say is that, again, students should take each one at least once so they can get an understanding of which test do they like, which one feels better, because again, these tests do not look like anything they'll actually do in high school, so it takes them getting used to. And so take each one of them at least once to kind of see which one they feel like they did better in, which one they like to set up a little bit more, and then take that one a few more times to really try to improve their score as high as they can. So again, in doing so, it shows that as students take tests the second and third times, as you're usually seeing an average jump of about 100 points on the SAT and about maybe 3 to 4 points on the ACT. So again, it can really make a difference to kind of take it a few times because again, you get used to it. You just understand what type of questions they're asking, what the vocabulary looks like for each of those tests. And so again, take it as many times as you can, really utilize those fee waivers. And again, as you do that, again, you're giving yourself a chance to do so. My plug for testing also, again, like I said, because we know that certain ethnic backgrounds, maybe on average, do not score as well just because of the limited access they might have to these type of things. Whatever opportunities you have to plug your students into test prep opportunities as soon as possible, really get them involved in that. Because again, as they get used to the test, usually those test preps, they're just taking the test over and over and over to understand what it looks like, learn the tips and tricks. And so again, that way, when it comes time to take the real one, that's not the first time to take C.
There's a growing trend in higher education for test optional schools, right? And so we're seeing that all across the country. And so it's important, though, that you recognize that if a school is test optional, to really pay attention to their admissions requirements. Test optional schools are not all created equal, right? And so depending on, test optional schools might say, okay, if you don't submit your SAT, then we need you to submit 2 more essays. They might say, okay, if you don't submit your SAT, we're going to need you, if you're interested in scholarships, you do need to submit your SAT. So it's important that if you are applying to schools that are SAT optional, that you get a sense of what that means for that particular institution, because it varies from institution to institution.
So recommendations. What I really point out with recommendations is that, again, as you're working, again, with your students, really encouraging them to really reach out and try to get those recommendations started early. Don't wait until senior year to try to get all of these done, because again, that's usually when they get a crush of students asking for applications anyway. Part of getting that started early is really encouraging your students to really start to develop relationships with their teachers, develop relationships with their counselors. Because when we're reading the applications, what we're looking for in those recommendations, we're looking for, again, what type of student the student is inside the classroom and beyond the grade itself. Because we can see that the student might have done well in the class, but inside the classroom, are they engaged? Are they working with their fellow classmates? Are they adding to the discussion? Are they impactful? Is there something specifically special about them that maybe stands out from other students that that teacher might have worked with over the time that they've been teaching? These type of things really kind of like call out in the application. And it might be really hard for a teacher or a counselor to write that type of recommendation for a student when the first time that they come to them asking for a recommendation is senior year with the resume, and can you write me an application? So generally those good letters of recommendations are ones where basically it's not even the student going to the teacher, it's the teacher being like, I really want to write this letter of recommendation for you. Like they want to recommend the student for the school. And that usually happens as that relationship is being developed over time.
So two brief points about the letters of recommendation, because I do think that letters of recommendation, especially when we're talking about first-generation low-income students, is everything, right? And so first-generation low-income students typically are not able to necessarily, they don't advocate for themselves as much as they should, right? And so going back to that context of whether or not that kid could get into that AP course, that student 9 times out of 10 is not going to write about that. And so if you, in the recommendation letters, that's when you all are allowed to provide us with some context. And so there's ways that letters of recommendation can be completely wasted. If you go into your letter of recommendation and all you're going to do is talk to us about how strong of a student the student is, that's a wasted letter of recommendation. We see that on their transcript, right? Also, if you're going to write a letter of recommendation that's only going to talk about all the students' extracurricular activities, that's also a wasted letter of recommendation, because on the Common Application, there's 10 slots for them to list all of their extracurricular activities, and there's also essay prompts for them to talk about those extracurricular activities. So in the letters of recommendation, for me personally, I know one of the things that I'm typically looking for are the non-cognitive variables that make those students competitive. And so that's looking at things like their emotional intelligence, taking a look at, has this student gone through any types of adversity in their high school or in their family career. One of the things that I think that is overlooked across the country is when a student is unable to get involved in extracurricular activities, but they might be the first of 5 siblings in the family, right? So talking about those types of things in the recommendation letters really allows us to advocate for those students. And so if we can talk about those types of things, we see students who might have B+ averages all across their high school transcript. They have superlative SATs, and so the question is what's going on in the classroom? All of a sudden, we read the recommendation letter and we realize that this kid is walking to school 10 miles to and from. Or this student is working 40 hours a week to help mom and dad support the family. And so it's those types of things that are really, really important to be recognized in the letters of recommendation, especially for those populations, because 9 times out of 10, those students are not talking about those pieces in their college application. Question?
Just quick, does it matter if it's teachers of core classes compared to other classes that are more like elective type classes?
That's a really good question. Her question, for those who might not have heard her, was, does it matter what subject those letters of recommendation come from? So this goes back to my kind of overall theme of academic alignment, right? And so if a student is interested in something like engineering, if they can get letters of recommendation from a science teacher or a math teacher, that's really, really great. Most institutions are going to require 3 letters of recommendation, 2 from a teacher, 1 from a guidance counselor, right? And so that is kind of how that goes. But however, every institution also will accept additional letters of recommendation. And so for those of you who might be college access counselors or community-based organization counselors, that's really another great opportunity. And we read every single one of them. We read every single one of those letters of recommendation. So that's an opportunity for you to once again draw up, give us some insight into that student and who that student is.
So real quickly about extracurricular activities. Again, the important things for this is quality over quantity. So again, in the Common Application at least, you have a limited number of spots that you can put in. So if you have a student that's really involved, you really want them to really be thinking about what are those activities that really they're most passionate about, really are the ones that kind of like help tell us a story of how they're filling their time outside of school. What's important to point out is that, again, we look for commitment, we look for impact. When we're looking at these, and so again, we see how long the student is involved in the activity, so what years in high school they've done it, how many hours a week they commit to that activity, so we can really get a sense of how they build their time outside of school. And so again, the important thing is that, we want the students to be doing things that matter to them, because as it matters to them, we get a better sense of who they are. And so again, the activities they should be doing them because they care about it. They're actually committed to that cause or whatever the case may be, not doing it just to put it on a list on a college application. So again, when we see an application and a student has done like 7 or 8 activities and they started them all in the 11th grade, that kind of signals something to us. As opposed, we see a variety of things that they might be doing. Again, students that are well-rounded, that's absolutely great, that's fine, but we also see students that are well lopsided, and that's completely fine as well. So if all that they do is volunteering, and that's it, with one activity, but they commit 30 hours a week to it, wherever their free time is outside of school, that's fine, because we know that it is what they do outside of school. So really getting a sense of like how they commit to those activities. And also as we see those, again, leadership is great. If you're the president of it or if you're a founder of it, that's great as well. Impact is the important thing that we're looking for. So you can be impactful without being the president or the founder or the vice president of the organization. So again, how would that organization be different if you were not there? So again, that's the type of impact that we look for when we're looking at these extracurricular activities, and never use it as an excuse. And so again, if you had to commit all this time to one activity, and again, your grades, we're holding you accountable to the grades that you've had. So again, if you're doing a bunch of activities and your grades are suffering, again, that might be a reason to kind of recalibrate what activities you're doing, which ones are the ones that you really care about. Because again, you need to do well in your classes.